On that note, hello and welcome to the next edition of the Frontrunner Football Podcast. Powered by whatever you decide to be drinking. I'm hitting a soft drink. Mazala, what are you having?
Just water for now, man.
Just water for now. Oh, okay, cool. And then you see it's escalating. Water, soft drink, wine. Good evening to you, John T. Mazola. Thanks, guys, for joining me. I guess we've had a bit of a samey kind of news cycle, but just some things getting over the line. We'll speak about that in a few moments' time with you, Mazola, as part of the whole Bit vs Bits thing. But essentially, they did break their silence, John T, coming out to say, before the ink had dried, we didn't want to say anything. Now that the ink is dry, we love our people. And after 99 years, this is the goodbye you're going to get. Bye.
Yeah, they obviously confirmed what everybody already knew, that TTM have bought the club and are moving it to the Limpopo. Why they denied it in previous, the excuse they sort of gave in their statement was that the pen hadn't been put to paper yet, so they didn't want to say anything. I'm not sure about that.
But then they still go on to say that it hasn't been ratified by the league, which would strike me as pen also needing to be on paper.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously the PSL Exco still has to ratify it, but as we've discussed previously on this podcast, it seems like a foregone conclusion that they'll kind of ratify it and it'll go through. Obviously, as Mazola's been writing about a lot, there's been a lot of discussions in place, and a lot of Wits players already basically set to leave at the end of the season because Wits won't really exist anymore. So I found it a little bit, insincere. Sort of that statement saying, we've honoured our players' contracts. We will honour our players' contracts, and the reason we didn't say anything about this before was because we hadn't put pen to paper yet. I mean, a lot of its employees and a lot of its players, were certainly the people I spoke to, not necessarily the players, but there were people who were very frustrated with the club for not, because they were selling up and they were saying nothing of concrete to their employees, which is not fair.
Yeah.
And now you've got obviously the situation where TTM will move the club to the Limpopo, and my understanding is that no players are obligated to go. Once you move province, no player is obligated to go to the Limpopo with the club. They have the choice of going or not going, and obviously a lot of them will find new employment. But it didn't ring true, and what also didn't ring true with Wits was, for me anyway, was Wits University saying, we had nothing, releasing a statement earlier in that day saying we had nothing to do with this. We sold our stake in the club to Bid.
When was that? When was that?
Well, exactly. When was that? Because I was being told by members of Wits that Wits had, like a week ago, that Wits University had a 40% stake in the club.
Yeah.
So if they sold it, just to complete the sale, they were like, okay, well, you buy the shares from us and then you can sell.
Exactly. That's what it seems like.
It is what it seems like, and it doesn't 100% make any difference, does it?
It doesn't, but I guess then, they can then put out that worded statement.
Oh yeah, the university were basically trying not to have any involvement.
Sure.
And I guess that they still, I think what I'm hearing is that Wits will still exist in some way or another. That's what we've been discussing. It'll still be they'll still have the entity Wits, but it's just no longer an absolute Premiership franchise.
Yes.
The franchise has been sold. But the Wits structures, the academy, and that will still exist, and Wits in some form will still exist. It just will no longer be a top flight.
For sure, they might have to come in at the lowest levels and work their way up again.
They may have to do that.
Yeah,
I mean, Kamsa, they could buy someone else's status and appear in the next few weeks if they get an investor. I guess. I mean, that's how it seems to work. But for now, there's no top flight Wits. There's no Wits there's no professional Wits, if you like. There's no PSL Wits.
Yeah, at this
I
point
don't
in
know where
time.
Mr. Molefe is gone.
Yeah. He's just disappeared off the call.
Mm.
I wonder if like his internet is down or what. He's not saying anything. Let's see. We lost you, Chief.
Maybe his internet crashed.
Oh, maybe.
Also, I was thinking where he went.
Huh.
Did I say? I didn't say anything. I always wonder.
Should I pause? Okay, Mazola, the next part of it, of course, is the personnel, right? They're being moved out, a lot of high-earning players. And Sundowns, as well-stocked as they are, have now made a deal for 3 soon-to-be former Wits players. Take us through that deal.
It's goalkeeper Ricardo Goss.
Mm-hmm.
It's young Hashim Domingo.
Okay. Yes,
and Gift Mutupa. We know they've been after Gift's signature for some time now, since January. I mean, I think even Gift himself sort of sent some type of SOS to Mamelodi Sundowns, because I think he was on Power FM just the other week, talking about his desire and appetite to play in the CAF Champions League. I had an interview with Gift in January about wanting to play for Mamelodi Sundowns, and at the time I think Wits rejected the offer, and there were insinuations from I think it was Coach Peter Musimani at a press conference that one of the players, he didn't mention him by name. I think he might have been referring to either Aubrey Mudiba or Gift Mutupa, that the amount of money, the transfer figure that was being asked at the time was quite high. So he's finally got his man. We also know that Sundowns also wanted Tyson and Dion Hoto. I think by now we can expect those 2 players to join Orlando Pirates, although still not quite clear, because both their agents are still denying that the two players have signed contract with Orlando Pirates. But let's see how that unfolds. Look, people are questioning Mamelodi Sundowns' decision to sort of go on this buying spree of buying players in a jumbo pack, if you like, which would be the 3 players. Some people are arguing that Sundowns do not need these players. If you look, my argument is that if you look at the age of especially these 3 that they've signed now, forget Tyson, forget Dion Hoto, that you can make up your own mind about why they wanted players that, especially Tyson, who turns 31 next year, probably would have given them just 3 years at the highest level, given the fact that they've also got about 5-6 center backs. That I think they were purely chasing him because he's Tyson, and if he's available, why not try and get him? But if you look at Domingo, if you look at Gift, if you look at Ricardo Goss, 20, 24, 25, and 26. And for me, they can easily play at Mamelodi Sundowns for the next 10 years. I think we know, we've heard Coach Peter Musimani on the record about wanting to start a fresh new team, a young team, drop the average age. We know Dennis Onyango and Kennedy Mwene well past 34, 35. So you need a successor there. I don't think they're going to get, they're definitely not going to get Richard Ofori. It looks like he could either stay at Maritzburg or go overseas or go to Orlando Pirates. I think he's definitely not, or maybe not definite, because anything can change. But I don't think you can probably rule him out of going to Kloorkop. Then in comes Ricardo Goss. I think they're also preparing, because we've reported several times that Riyad Peterse is most likely to leave Mamelodi Sundowns and go hedge his bets somewhere else for in search of regular game time. So that's sorted. look, they've got Jody February coming in. He's also about the same age as Ricardo Goss. So will they have, I know Peter Msimani has been on the record before that he prefers to have 4 goalkeepers, to have 3 registered in the Champions League and 4 registered in the domestic league in case anything happens. So it's a question of will he keep all 4, especially if Red Peterson goes, or one of Jody and Ricardo Goss will go out on loan. You probably can expect that to happen. And then we come to Hashim Domingo. We look at Temba Zwane, Busiso Vilakazi, and Augustin Serignone. Not in the twilight of their career per se, but if you're looking at building for the future, Hashim, who's come back from Europe, 24 years old, loads of potential. What he can do. Can be a player that can fit in now, even in the short term or long term. I don't suspect he will go out on loan. I think he will try to fight for his place. But I see Hashim as a Mamelodi Sundowns player for the next 10 years. And then Gift Mutupa, we know that Sundowns have been looking for a striker, for a number 9. They wanted Gift in January. Now they finally have him. We know Mauricio Afonso, he looked very good coming in. Then he suffered an injury. So they've got sort of cover, if I can put it like that. I don't know if they're still going to go out. There are talks now that they're looking at other players on the continent that have Champions League experience. But you can also expect, I think Sundowns will offload quite a few in the coming months as well.
Sure. I mean, they'll have to. They can't just bring in all that many people and not get rid of a few players. Yes, Jonty.
Sorry, just to add to that. I think that obviously what needs to be said, I've mentioned it a few times before, is that we don't expect, unfortunately for Mazzola, he's probably going to have to take quite a lot of stick on social media for a little bit longer, because the likelihood of Sundowns making an official announcement on this is low when we don't know when this season ends and the next one begins. So Sundowns, I don't know. I mean, there's a deal in place clearly, but when do the contracts start? So I don't think you can expect any official announcements. Unfortunately for Mazzola, he's going to have to put up with some trolls for a while longer before the signing is done. But it is obviously Wits have offloaded a whole load of players, as we've said before, and it's a sort of fire sale to finance. In some way help finance the deal for TTM to buy them. It's very strange to me that Bidvest pulled out at the speed they did.
So now, Jonty, I see on Pagati you guys are running with Butlem Kwanazi and Sfiso Tlanti's futures. I mean, those are 2 important players who, at this point in time, seem unattached.
I did speak to Paul Mitchell today, Kwanazi's agent, and he said they're not decided yet on where he's going. He is 30 years old, so any contract he signs might well be one of his last obviously in professional football. He's got a year left on his contract at Wits. Wits have said in their statement that they are prepared to obviously pay out the contracts, or they honour the contracts. And my understanding of sort of the rules is that there's absolutely no obligation for Mkwanazi to go and play for TTM. So in theory, he could see out a year of his contract, get paid by Bidvest, and not play. But my feeling is that some sort of deal has to get done, because no player really wants to sort of do nothing for a season.
Sit on the sideline,
And I know Mazzola has said that Chiefs are interested, which is quite possible, but whether Chiefs can sign him with their transfer ban is still to be obviously sorted out. It depends on obviously someone coming in. But all Wits players are actually in that situation where even though the club is moving to the Limpopo, they don't have to. I also spoke to Mike McCarb today, who's the agent of Fukumanja and Benson Mhlongo, but Brighton and Mhlongo and
Lorenzo Godinho.
And Gordinho, and he did say to me that they might move, they might stay. It's a case of any employment is employment, and if TTM make them the right offer, then they could yet stay at TTM. So there's always possibilities of TTM keeping some of the Wits players, but no, as far as I understand it, there's no Wits player obliged to go to the Limpopo because it's moving province.
Yeah.
And so there's no obligation there.
Okay.
So that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of the holdup, do we know as to why the league are seemingly the last to know as to this deal and obviously finalizing it and getting it over the line? Usually, there's not such a huge chasm between when we hear from it from the two clubs involved and the league kind of knowing about it and ratifying it. Any guesses as to why it's not panned out that way this time around?
Look, I think it's quite right to suggest that the league is often the last to find out, because I'll tell you why. Because the two parties must first agree that there can be a deal in place. The two clubs must first be able to know that there's a bank guarantee and there's money for the deal to go through before an application is sent through for the league to ratify the deal. I think the difference here, if I compare it with what's happened in the past with an Amazulu buying Tanda Royal Zulu, or John Committees buying Mpumalanga Black Aces, and Free State Stars being on the verge of being sold by the consortium led by Nyaza Lusufi, is that, in those instances, every party involved took a decision to keep it quiet and not necessarily run wild with dishing out information to the press. I know at the time Panyaza was attempting to buy Free State Stars with leading an unknown sort of consortium. He was in the papers and on radio shows quite a lot, but he to some degree he never disclosed too much. He just confirmed that there were talks with the club in the top flight to buy a status, but all will be revealed once the PSL has ratified it and there's proof that the money is there, it's in the bank account, and the deal can be officially signed and sealed. And I think it was the same with John Committees. It was the same with Amazulu. I think when those stories broke, the PSL were pretty much in the know, and they, it just took it was a matter of days before they had ratified the decision. And I think also what complicates the situation at the moment is the current times that we're in. As you can expect, the would-be owners of that Bidvest Wits top flight status are besides themselves with excitement to obviously be in the top flight, and to have to wait for an announcement maybe in September when potentially a new season could start. It just feels too long a wait. When you have big news, you feel the need to perhaps share them, especially when you've confirmed that you've sold the status of your lower division side. So I think the league in cases in previous cases, the league has often been sort of the last player, the last roll of the dice, if you like. The difference is that I think the parties involved had always undertaken to keep it under wraps until such a time that the league can confirm that it's ratified the decision. And even if they talk about it, it's just to, for instance, I'll use an example with Highlands Park. I mean, there really are talks and murmurs about Highlands Park probably being also sold to Tim Sukazi, and then maybe relocating and being renamed TX Galaxy. But all you're hearing at the moment is the Highlands Park management sort of a bit in denial about it, but at the same time saying, look, because of the current times, we are open to anything that can happen. If we get an offer and it's a good enough offer, we will take it. But TTM, on the other hand, have been, which personally I've enjoyed the transparency, but obviously the league and depending which side of the coin you're looking at it, you might find it a bit distasteful, or even from the side of Wits, that a club so old with such rich history, most of its players, if not all of them, and the staff were only being officially told about all of this, I think, either on a Monday or yesterday, which is shocking to say the least.
Yeah. Well, there's also an article on I just saw on Kickoff saying with the acting PSL CEO, Marta Medlala, referring to talk of the sale as township talk. And even though Wits have now confirmed it as well. And saying that, obviously, there's some reference, I don't know if it's from her, I just briefly glanced on the article, or from Kickoff, to the article that does say, which we've mentioned here before, that you're not supposed to, in the NSL handbook, it says you're not supposed to own a club within 12 months of owning another club, which obviously Masala Muladzi would not fall into that category, excuse me. He owned TTM, and now he owns, in theory, the Wits franchise. So I guess that could come up, but it seems like, as we've discussed, that these things tend to be approved regardless by the PSL Executive Committee. And why would there be so much confidence in the deal unless...
Well, I guess they're kind of thinking, how do they go back? You know, there is no turning back at this point. The deal, you can't force Wits to take back a club that they don't want to have, you know. So I think that's probably where the confidence, as misplaced and misguided as it may be, probably comes from.
Yeah, I mean, for the PSL, also they need revenue. They need the 16 clubs, and for them to like just turn this down would be sort of shooting themselves in the foot. I guess. So they have to sort of bypass that particular clause. But for them to be still denying it now, is just like, why? There's a lot of that.
I think, with the communication that's been so bad, I think they just want to say, listen, we want to only speak when this thing is legit and is official. What's the latest on training, guys? Our team's back at it. I saw a tweet from Pizzo Mosemani, where he said he watched the players in Europe, and after the hour mark, you could see that the game was taking its toll on them. And he reckons that 3 weeks at a minimum is what we'd need just to get that warm up and the periodization going. Are teams back at it? Are they cutting into those 3 weeks? Where do we stand at the moment?
Well, as far as I know at the moment, there's no team that's gone back into non-contact training, certainly not legitimately. They're still waiting. Everyone I've spoken to says they're still waiting for the PSL to give them the green light to go ahead. The government have obviously said it's okay, but as far as I understand, a joint liaison committee of SAFA and the PSL still need to write to the government explaining how exactly this is going to happen and how they're going to stick to the regulations and how, if you look at the example set by sort of the EPL and the Bundesliga, they test every single player every week. And that is something that
a huge undertaking
are going to have to do if they're going to stick to those kinds of rules. And how that will go into place and how it will happen and whether it will happen. And as I've said before, the timeline on starting again seems to be about a month. From the first non-contact training to starting is about a month. So at the moment, it seems like clubs are waiting, except those who...
secretly
except those who have... I've heard sort of whispers in my ear, and I did see that Times Live article about Chipper United. But I've heard whispers in my ear that teams have been training, sort of since the beginning of lockdown, or regardless. Teams, but we won't get into that here because I don't know for which teams, and I don't know. Nobody really is willing to say who and how, and except obviously Times got that Chipper story, but it is a thing that is still up in the air, and we're still waiting. But it is imminent, I think. It just, as we've obviously also, it's just like the wheels seem to turn rather painfully slowly.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, I thought we
talking about we think it's happening in the next couple of days, but then
exactly. I mean, I thought we'd get through the podcast without mentioning the inaction because we're literally, it's much ado about nothing because nothing has happened, Mazola, and we find ourselves in the same position week in, week out, where it's just like, okay, time seems to be of the essence, if we're not mistaken. It's 3 weeks now. It's about to be 3 weeks into June. And, technically players haven't been allowed to train.
Yeah, look, I feel like every time if we have to have another podcast and we ask this question, I'm just going to log off, because... There's just no.
Oh,
That's what I'm saying. I tried to avoid it the whole episode, but you cannot. It ends up being the elephant in the room, where it's like, we're saying all of this, but where's the intent to go play football?
I read a story today by Mark Stradom, our colleague at Times Live. He had spoken to CEO Mato Madlala about this very thing, and Mato was basically kind of hinting that maybe we will have the answer to that in the next 7 to 14 days, because they've submitted, or at least written to the sports ministry, outlining how they plan the return of football and how they plan, for teams to resume training, and they expect to hear the turnaround time. She suggested was anything up to, from now up until 14 days. So that's 2 more weeks of waiting. That's that's like the first week of July. And then so basically you won't see football in July pretty much, because teams probably have to train for another 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and then perhaps you get the restart of the domestic league in within the first week of August, and you hope they complete it in that time. I mean, if you're playing World Cup style, you'll be able to finish those, give or take, 54 plus games maybe in that month, and then maybe you can even begin a new season on the 1st of September. And last week, SAFA received a letter. They asked FIFA directly with regards to returning, any deadlines about returning to football, and FIFA made it clear that they've left it to the government and the member association, the mother body of the different countries, with regards to when they think they can start football again, and when they can end it, and when they can begin the transfer window and the new registration period. So, obviously there's been talk bandied about FIFA needing, in fact, I think it was Chairman Ivan Koza in an interview in the Sunday Times, where he said FIFA are waiting to hear from them before June 30 about when they plan to restart. But that letter, I suppose that's probably one of the reasons why it was leaked. so that we're able to see what FIFA says about this June 30 deadline. And from what FIFA have said to SAFA, there is no June 30 deadline. It's up to the mother body and the government to sort of work together in finding out whether, and determining when football can resume, and when the transfer window can open up again, and that sort of the registration of new players and the new season can begin. So it's almost kind of open-ended, if you like. Perhaps if you were to put a deadline to it, you'd probably say somewhere in the middle of October, because there's also the CAF Champions League. CAF also sent a circular to member associations as well, to say, in terms of the 2020-21 season of the CAF Champions League, they're looking at a October sort of start, so that they cram up the league and be able to finish at the end of May next year.
Okay, no, cool. I guess, it's good to get some sort of guidance from some sector of the footballing mother body, and that's actually quite illuminating. Okay, and then in terms of the economy kind of coming back, John T, are we hoping that the football economy is going to come back with the training, in terms of the journalism side, guys being able to go to the games, well, to the training sessions for the one-on-ones with the coaches and that kind of thing? How important is that to have as a consideration at the moment they're allowed to train again, the teams, everyone around the football, especially the journalists are allowed to participate again?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone wants to get back. The photographers want to get back. They want live sport again in South Africa, so they can, that their economy can start working in terms of making money and functioning properly. Zoom will, like this, will give you a certain amount of interviews. We've certainly, with the South African Football Journalists Association, since I joined, my experience has been very good with interviewing a lot of people. So that's an alternative, which has certainly become a reality in this time. But it would be nice to get on the side of the training pitch, see a training session, and speak to a coach face to face. I'm not sure 100% what rules will be in place, whether it'll be informal or whether you'll be allowed in with a mask and allowed to interview a player at a distance of 2 meters or whatever it is. But hopefully at some point, we can get back to Groenklop and Naturena and Rand Stadium and interview some players and coaches and get back to sort of what is relative normality. But it's still, as Mazola mentioned, I think going to be at least a month. And if we're not going to start training until July, we're not going to start playing until August. And my only concern is whether they can run this thing professionally. And as someone did mention to me today, with our infection rate and with our deaths sort of going up at the moment, because as predicted by the epidemiologists, our rates of infection are going like this. So, what happens if we start non-contact training and we do everything like the EPL and the Bundesliga? We test every player and, we get 30, 20 infections, 20 cases of COVID. Then what happens? They have to lock down the whole league again. And there's all those possibilities, but I'm hopeful that, there'll be a self-contained bubble created and we can have a situation where we can create a healthy or a COVID-free environment, and we can get on with it as quickly as possible. But it is a tricky situation, and people's health obviously has to take priority. So it's all a bit up in the air at the moment, and I think that's what causes a lot of the delay. Is like it's very as much as we get frustrated, and I do, and I even read that SAFA statement, which sort of says, I mean, I got annoyed with that SAFA statement because it said update on league resumption, and then you click on it and it's like, we've been told by FIFA we can start whenever we want. It wasn't helpful.
Well, for sure.
But I do have empathy in some level, because also it's like very difficult because you have to look after people and people's health has to take priority.
For sure.
But also the economy has to get going again. And that's also why I think the president this week was like, well, people can go to restaurants and the hairdresser and
it's in your hands.
And the cinema. Don't forget the cinema.
The cinema.
And the cinema.
That bastion of cleanliness. The cinema.
Yeah.
Yes, don't forget that one. Mazola, your thoughts in terms of your confidence? Obviously, the longer you take to prep and do something, the more the expectation is that you get it right. The league is almost putting themselves under more and more pressure to say, hey, well, you've taken this long. You better go without a hitch here. And like Jonty points out, that ambition and that expectation doesn't really meet up with the reality that we are going to see an increase in cases.
Yeah, look, I'd even argue that it's not necessarily maybe even about preparation as such. I think, the league had made it clear from the beginning that if football does not resume, and the sentiments were also shared by several club bosses, that if they do not go back to playing football and it's on TV and they can get advertising and they can market the players and the sponsorships can activate, the industry will collapse. It's as simple as that. Our industry will collapse. And I think it's probably more about that than necessarily, trying to, of course, you have to safety and healthy and health precautions and regulations and follow the guidelines the government have set out for us. But I think at the same time, it's about saving the livelihood. I mean, think about it this way. Obviously, different sectors are now coming back as per the president's announcement last night, and even long before that when we moved to lockdown level 3. But in essence, if football comes back, then you are saving another sector. You're saving more jobs in the country at a time where people are getting salary cuts. People are living from hand to mouth, and it's just now almost feels like it's in our hands. It's a matter of am I scared? Am I scared of the virus, or am I scared of going? I know it sounds extreme, but am I scared of the virus, or am I scared of going hungry? To some degree, if that makes sense. So, look, given that we won't have a vaccine for a long time to come, it looks like, I think we should probably prepare ourselves to try and live and coexist with the virus. You know, and I've never thought in my entire life I'd say something like that, but we have to somehow find a way to coexist with the virus. If we social distance, if we keep to the hygiene and the government requirements. I know it's difficult with sports, especially contact sports, and that we had our SAFJA press conference today also with another sports industry expert, and they were talking about golf surviving because that's social distancing personified. But anyway, I could go on, but you get my drift. Yeah,
I get your drift. Maybe they'll catch up with you on Twitter to get the rest of that drift. But thank you very much, gents. We're done for time as far as this week's podcast is concerned. We'll catch you in the new week, yeah? And before I go, just lastly, from the Front Runner Football family, just our condolences to the Mokoena family on the passing of Bramaik Mokoena of Free State Stars. Until next week, guys, be well.